Intros are weird.
G.I Joe.
Just play the intro.
Yeah, we'll do.
G.I Joe, American hero. G.I Joe is there.
Hi, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to the hallway scene. My name is Mim, this is Dad, and today we are doing another installment in our series, Retro versus Reboot. Just don't watch the other one because I don't like it.
And we were dumb and took on one of the biggest retro versus reboots we could have done.
Today's topic is G.I Joe.
Joe!
As you can see, there's a lot of stuff to cover.
So
We're doing
means...
an overall, just overarching timeline.
Also, in our family, at least with me and Dad, G.I Joe's number one. Everything else falls into second, third, fourth.
Yeah. We are not going to get into the original G.I Joe just because I didn't buy those. I had one Super Joe that I inherited from him. I jumped in 1982. I got my sister very mad at me because she worked as a waitress at an ice cream parlor called Farrell's. And she would give me all the nickels and dimes and pennies from her tips. And I was supposed to save that for something else. I was supposed to save it. And I did not save it. And not only did I get her mad at me, I got the Target cashier mad at me when I walked in.
Because you paid in nickels and quarters?
Not even quarters. It was nickels and pennies. I paid for my very first version 1 Snake Eyes figure.
It was like $2.
It was less than $2, but when you're paying in nickels and pennies.
That's a lot of nickels and pennies.
And I can remember him being in a bag and dumping them on the counter.
Worth it.
Oh yeah, it was a straight on. It was the very first, because before that, Star Wars had been it, right? Star Wars action figures, and they were fantastic and great, and we all loved them. But they moved like this, and moved at the hip, and their neck swiveled, and that was it.
Wow.
All of a sudden, G.I. Joe gets brought back in, and they move at the knee, and they move at the elbows, and they move at the arms, but not just like this. They can do almost a full circular arm movement, and they had the O-ring in them, right? So, is Breaker? Yes, Breaker's one of my straight arms that I still have still, so yeah, you know. And I remember my Snake Eyes immediately took on all my Star Wars figures and beat them all. In fact, it's really sad to say, but Hoth Rebel Commander, that was my first customized figure. He had red dots all over him where Snake Eyes' bullets shot him up. Yeah, pretty violent, 80s kid. Before we really dive into it, though, in full disclosure, I am a comics Joe guy. I am not so much a cartoon, even though I have the cartoons. And I love episodes of the cartoons, but the cartoons... By the time the cartoons started coming out, I was already so ingrained in the comic book that...
Praise be Larry Hama.
Yeah, that the stories in the cartoons really were kind of... I saw them even as 9, 10, 11. I saw them as kind of like, these are goofy.
My knowledge of G.I. Joe is coming downstairs, and James was watching G.I. Joe on TV, and I thought, well, why not? And just watched it with him.
Yeah, Miriam got hit with Spy Troops in Battle vs. Venom.
Yeah, James. So James's introduction, like you said, this is G.I. Joe's kind of a family thing, and James really got brought in.
And Sigma 6.
Was Sigma 6, yeah. Now, Joe versus Cobra was relaunched, so the real American hero kind of mythos, characters and stuff were relaunched in 2001, which is the year James was born. G.I. Joe's kind of, it's easy for me to talk about, and then it's hard for me to talk about because there's just so much. James and I are involved in a local collectors club, here still. We did go to as many of the official G.I. Joe fan
Hold up the badges.
That just seems like an over the top. Anyway,
No,
I'm missing one. I've been to 3.
It is cool. I mean, you used to get these badges.
Hold up the lanyards and stuff.
As anybody who went to those conventions will tell you, G.I. Joe's what got us there, but
the crappy figure brigade is what got us to stay.
Yeah.
And bingo!
Hanging out, the friends you made, that's what made Joe Con. Let's talk about the toys first.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like I said, G.I. Joe is credited with being like the first action figure, right? Back in the 60s, they were looking for something to compete with Barbie.
There's a lot more videos of better YouTubers that have done full histories.
Yeah,
so.
and we don't want to do the full history here. So he comes out as this generic soldier, right? And as time goes on, he started out, I'm pretty sure he started out Army. They had Marines, they had Navy, they had Air Force eventually. Then they had the astronaut capsule. Very traditional military and everything else. And then Vietnam hits, right? And so war toys in general kind of take a dive, so they rebrand. That's the first reboot of G.I. Joe in the 1970s to Adventure Team. So still 12 inches tall, still cloth.
Made with Kung Fu glue.
All that. It's going great. And it always seems like real world butts in on G.I. Joe and that. Smack, oil embargo, oil prices, kind of like right now, shoot through the roof. 12 inches is just not sustainable. Sales are kind of starting to dip anyway, so they try to do Super Joe for a little while, and that's when they do all kinds of crazy concepts. Bullet Man and the Invader, who looks like he's an alien attacker, but he looks like a caveman. I don't know. They just start spinning all these different things, trying to make things work, and finally just decided, you know what, it's too pricey. They shut it down. G.I. Joe stays dormant for about 4 or 5 years, I guess, into the 70s, into the early 80s. If you go on Netflix, there is a great series, The Toys That Made Us, that kind of is all about the pitch to get a real American hero started. And that's what I grew up with. But, I mean, it was kind of the perfect time because video games weren't around yet. I mean, as far as getting an action figure started. Star Wars was, people pretty much saw the writing kind of on the wall. Star Wars was about to come to an end, 1983. G.I. Joe comes in, super crowded for action figure toys, right? He-Man's out there. Star Wars is still out there. You got Micronauts. You got, and those are just kind of the big ones I can think of off the top of my head.
Transformers isn't that far removed.
They launched G.I. Joe back into it. And in the 80s, rah-rah, right? Ronald Reagan's president. It's all about how big and bad and everything else the U.S. can be. And so G.I. Joe, instead of being just a generic military guy, he gets made into a team. So G.I. Joe is the
code name for America's Special Forces.
G.I. Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. Its purpose, to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
You had Breaker, you had Grunt, you had Short Fuse, Flash, Stalker.
Rock and Roll Zap, Scarlet, Steeler, Snake Eyes, Hawk.
The cool thing about it, and their plan was, which was really cool, at least in the first few years, a kid mowing lawns during the summer could earn enough money to buy the entire line for that year. Well, and in just a few years, Hasbro's going to blow that because G.I. Joe is so wildly successful, they are able to pull off something that even today, collectors like, when are we getting the flag, remade?
Dun, 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 dun.
They talk about the flag. It was kind of done as on a joke, on a dare almost. How big could we make a toy?
7 feet, baby.
And still sell. Yeah, and still. And we think about back in 85, 86, when this thing was selling, it was $110. Not a lot of parents are dropping $110 on a toy. All my Joe buddies have heard this. They get kind of jealous of me and everything else. That is the flag I had as a kid. The only reason I have that flag. That sister who got, I took it off paying.
We blame Elizabeth for a lot of things.
Yeah. We were at a Walmart way back when. And Walmarts used to be, you go through the cashier aisles, but then at the front of the store, that used to be like the things that they had on sale that were they'd cut down really cheap. At our Walmart, the good deal was the aircraft carrier. And I still remember that. I had never seen an aircraft carrier in the store, but that night at Walmart, staring at the wall, there must have been at least 15, 20 aircraft carriers lined up in the front of that store. And they had been marked down to $65. I saw that flag and was like, oh my gosh. And I knew how cheap it was because, of course, every kid who was into G.I. Joe was paying attention to that vehicle. But somehow my sister convinced our mom, your grandmother, to buy that for me. And it wasn't even like Christmas. I had to wait till Christmas or my birthday. We got home that night and I opened it up and it was huge. It was so huge. I didn't have a brother or anybody I was sharing the room with. One of those beds got taken down to put the aircraft carrier in the room.
You want to switch spots?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Pathfinder. G.I. Joe will be right back.
We just moved to Utah. No, it was the summer before we officially moved to Utah when we were at Gil's house.
Oh, huh.
And then because all of your stuff was in the storage unit in Houston or in the closet that I was not allowed to get into.
Yes.
But would
Because we lived in a small apartment, so everything, yeah.
And so what I knew from G.I. Joe was the Spy Troops and the Valor versus Venom. So we go to Utah for that summer, and then Linda and Craig come down, and Craig has the box. And then I'm doing something, and I come back, and the room that I was staying in next, on top of the bed, was You Built the Flag.
Oh,
and so I walked in, and I went... And so my Transformers, my G.I. Joes, my Ben 10 figures,
everything.
the
went on the
Bionicles
flag.
all went on the flag immediately, and the Rattler would strafe the flag frequently, and all of my major deaths included a strafing from the Rattler.
But then they kind of rebranded into something I really didn't like. I mean, it was more neon. Of course, I wasn't buying G.I. Joe at this time. I was off at college, and but to compete against Toy Biz's Marvel superheroes and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they kind of went, some people would say flamboyant, very colorful, eco warriors,
Ninja Force, Mega...
They started to incorporate, and I think some people really saw
Everybody
that
became
as
a
down.
ninja.
So then Real American Hero starts to wind down and pilfer out. The problem is Real American Hero never really dies. It's like that hero that never dies. It just slowly kind of
Legends never
fades. Toys R Us then immediately picked it up as an exclusive line and did some
Daddy
really...
Destro.
some weird color combinations and mold choices. All of a sudden, end of 99, 2000, Real American Hero Collection kind of gets rebranded a little bit into 2-packs and vehicles, and Hasbro realizes, there's still demand for this, which leads up to the 2001 Spy Troops, or G.I. Joe versus Cobra reboot.
Then Spy Troops.
And then Valor versus Venom. And then there's a theme every year. They created the Sigma 6 figures, which are about 7 inches tall, very animated looking.
And where's his staff?
A lot of people, when they came out, compared them to Small Soldiers movie that came out.
An awesome movie.
With the way the figures looked in there, very, animated style. It did have an anime cartoon that went along with it.
I just realized they did the hood and the helmet for this one.
They did. The helmet actually went over the hood. Then G.I. Joe came back in 2007. They launched the 25th anniversary, which was met with way more excitement than what they'd originally intended, and it ended up lasting multiple
till Rise of Cobra,
till the movies were released. Rise of Cobra figures came out. You get the wonderful love fest to the fans with the Pursuit of Cobra toy line.
Pursuit of Cobra.
Then you had the second G.I. Joe movie toy line come out, and it was not so great, especially with the movie being delayed and pushed back. Kind of hosed G.I. Joe a little bit at retail to where the point where within a couple of years it's back to being an exclusive line at Toys R Us. The only way to get new G.I. Joe toys was through the club, who continually jacked up their prices, kind of turned an extortion game into a piece of art. I mean, the way they did it was insane. Validized to finally kind of this resurgence with what a lot of collectors are freaking out about, and that is the classified line, the 6-inch figure. I am not much of a 6-inch figure. I tried to get into Black Series, but I've quickly kind of gotten out of it.
118 for life, baby.
Yeah, except for the Joes, and that's just because the 6-inch, they've been able to get, especially lately, the styling really good. There is controversy with that, right? That when they were first coming out, they didn't look enough like the vintage figures. Now
they look
people
too
are
much
saying
like the
too
vintage.
much. Yeah, but this Alley Viper to me is just kind of like perfect because they gave it the 80s.
You're gonna talk smack about the Pursuit of Cobra Alley Viper like that?
Yes, because the Alley Viper needs to be orange and blue. It looks like the Alley Viper from the 80s, but with a lot of modern little blurbs and blemishes, and so that brings us up to current with toys. Been rebooted several times. Now that I'm thinking about it, I even skipped an iteration because I totally skipped that line and never bought a single one of them, and that's G.I. Joe Extreme. Anyway, that is it for now. This is the hallway scene.
See you next time. Like
Peace
and
out.
subscribe.
Right.
Bye.
G.I. Joe will return after these messages.